Good news you can use with that phone, yeah. She got the good news you can use. Good news you can use for your life. So listen up, everybody. Listen up, everybody. She got the good news you can use. Good news you can use for your life. If you wanna get the info that'll help you throughout your life, yeah.
Hello, and welcome again to another edition of the Boomer Beat. This is a special edition where, from now until, who knows when, I'll be interviewing folks to find out how their lives have gone all these years. Like, if you knew then what you know now, how different would your life be? So, kicking us off in this brand new series is my friend, my virtual friend, who I hope to meet one day, is Jeb Buffington. Hey, Jeb, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine, Bev. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And so, just for our viewers, Jeb and I met through a high school classmate of mine, which is just the most bizarre thing because I understand more and more that the world is a lot smaller than we really want to believe that it is. So, okay, Jeb. So I had to just kind of say that, right? And it's been a
Good
pleasure
old Mike.
you. All right. So, with that being said, take us through your childhood and how you got to where you are today.
Oh my God, 62 years. That's a long story. Um, let's see. I was born in Boston. Both of my parents were teachers. Um, they split up when I was very young. My dad had some emotional problems. Made for a sort of a little bit of a broken childhood, but I think everybody has stuff like that. You know, we're never the only ones to go through stuff, difficult stuff. I was raised in Boston, then family moved up to Maine, and I always felt like sort of the black sheep of the family. I just didn't have that much in common with my family. I was able to choose family later. Left the house when I was about 16, went away to school, and then college, and transferred finally from New York out to Texas, University of Texas, where I finally began to feel at home, like I had been raised in this preppy New England background. Not that there's anything wrong with that. In fact, there are, things that I take from my mom and dad and my family heritage that I'm very proud of. But it was great to get out to Texas and feel like I could reinvent myself. I think that was, a really important step, getting away from all expectations and sort of predefined roles. And I really loved it out in Texas. It was a gift to me in terms of liberty and trying on not a new skin exactly, but some new values and a new way of being. And that opened up a whole different world to me. I got into this strange esoteric study program in Asian studies. I wound up going to China, living there for almost a year, meeting my first wife there. She was a French woman who was also in China studying. And then lived 25 years in France before coming back to the States eight or so years ago, and building a house on the top of a mountain in North Carolina. And I have a completely different life than I ever did in Paris, or that I thought I would have anywhere, with a wonderful gal who's my second wife. So I have sort of her family. And my last wife, she's saying from the kitchen. Better be.
You better say that. I say the same thing. Your last one.
The last one. That's right. That's right.
Okay.
So yeah.
So that really caught me off guard. But knowing what you know now, if you knew then what you know now, how different do you think your life would have been? What would you have done differently?
it's funny because when you first sort of gave me the title of this little interview, I thought long and hard, boy, there are things, there are obviously episodes of pain, difficulty, the divorce, being separated from my kids that were painful, but they always led me on to something else. So I can't say, geez, if I had known my first marriage wasn't going to work out, I wouldn't have done it. No, because I have these two great boys who I adore. I call them boys; they're men now, and I wouldn't change anything about that because they exist, right? There are things like I thought I could have been kinder to more people growing up. That wouldn't have changed anything about how my life is, going over here. But it would have, if I have any regrets, are things like that I just wasn't kinder, that I was judgmental, that I was impatient sometimes. So there are things like that I do regret. But in terms of changing any of the decisions I made, even though they turned out to be difficult, I don't think I can actually own up to that, because they always, my life is here now, and if I've been able to find happiness and know what I value in a partner and the relationships that I have with other people and what I'm able to give, I only know of those things because I went through the crap the painful parts that I went through before. And again, I think all human beings we either learn from what we go through or we become bitter, and that's a terrible way to finish life, bitter about things. So I've tried to learn rather than regret.
Totally, I agree with that. You said something earlier that caught my ear. You said that when you went to Texas, you had an opportunity to reinvent yourself, which is a phrase that older folks tend to use. We get older and we reinvent ourselves. But it sounded like you were relatively young when you were in Texas and you were reinventing yourself. So let me ask you this. Do you think that is something that we are always doing, no matter how old we are? And why is that important to do?
As I said, for me, it was about sort of shucking off old expectations and I think, as I said, I was never really felt at home in my family, and so that was the first time I was completely independent of family. My grandmother, I'd been going to an Ivy League school, and when I told my grandmother, who was paying my tuition at that point, I found this great program out in Texas. It's something I really want to do, and she said, "Fine, if you really want to do it, but I would like you to be in the Ivy League school, so I'm not going to pay your tuition anymore." And that was. And I really, I appreciated her so much. She was an important woman in my life as a kid, my dad's mom. But I appreciated that. And I said, "Granny, I thank you for everything you've done so far, but I know this is the right move." So I accept that, so I was completely on my own. I was paying my own tuition. I was working part-time while going to school. And I guess it was a lesson in confidence because without knowing anybody, I wound up on my feet. I did have a great program at college. I did do some terrific work. I learned a lot about architectural antiques. I worked at a big importer. So it was maybe a lesson in confidence that I could actually stand up on my own, away from any sort of family influence, and get, have some accomplishments and do well. I think this idea of reinventing myself is probably something. I mean, I went to China, and that was a whole new thing. And then I came back to the States for a couple of years, and then I went to France and did it again. And then I moved to North Carolina and sort of did it again. Andrea said to me earlier today in the car, as we were driving up our drive to, our single lane road up the mountain, it takes about 15 minutes, having gone shopping in town this morning. She said, "Boy, I bet you when you're in Paris, you never thought your life would turn out like this. Like this would be the road, like you live on top of a mountain." And that's true. And isn't that great? Not to know, to have to let go of expectations and limitations that we put on ourselves and rules, and say, well, I did this 10 years ago. This is the woman that I love, and this is where she needs to be. She needs to come back to the States. I never thought I would. But okay, let's try that. Let's do it, and I guess it takes a bit of a leap of faith and some courage, but also the confidence knowing, we'll work it out. We'll find a way to make it happen. We'll find a way to make it work. And I'm privileged because I didn't have much money ever, but I never had prejudice working against me either. So doors were open to me in ways that may not be to all people, in a totally unfair way.
So in hindsight now, because hindsight's always 2020, and I don't even know if this is
Mhm.
really considered a hindsight question, but your boys are now adult men. What do you hope you have instilled in them and they have learned from you that they will carry with them into their own children?
Uh, Kindness is an important one, because I look at the boys and I see their intelligence, their emotional intelligence, not just the brain, but their ability to make contact with people and have really honest relationships. And they're both very kind, loving guys, with a lot to give, and they have the confidence to give it. I think if I had confidence battles, I certainly did growing up. I'm glad that by the time my boys came along, I was confident enough to give them an example, at least one step. I think they've taken their themselves much further in terms of self-confidence than I did, certainly at their age. One basically invented a role for himself at the top of a brand new company. He was one of the first consultants that started out, and things shifted around, and he just stepped into that role and took it on, and now he's a senior manager at a young age. The other one headed off, did studies all over the world, thanks to the French government who pays for that kind of stuff, and winds up in Australia working with the embassy and then food exporters, and now is getting back into one of his early passions, which is looking at the long-term, the future of food and where we get our protein, and looking at plant-based protein and protein that's grown out of cells in the lab and that kind of stuff. So it's, I admire those boys so much. And if I was able to give them a little bit of character, adjustments along the way, man, I'm so glad I had the chance to do it, because I just look at these guys. They're amazing.
All right. And
I don't
as
know if I
we,
answered your question.
well, you did kind of answer the question. You said you wanted them to exhibit kindness, and if you see kindness in them, because I look at my own daughter and I see that she is so much like me, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And while you don't like the ugly, it's still there. So I didn't want to instill that in her, but that's what she saw, and that's what she kind of took away as well. So it
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah,
All
they say
right.
that. Wise people will say your family, you will see the best and the worst of yourselves reflected back to you and your children. And I think you and I are probably harder on ourselves than some people are. So we, the stuff that's not so great makes us cringe a little bit, but that's part of being human.
Well, I will say this: my bad in her is not a bad thing, because she has learned to stand her ground on so many levels.
Right.
So I will receive that.
Right. There's always a double-edged sword, I wish they weren't so feisty or so something. On the other hand, it means they do know how to defend themselves. That, it's always a double-edged sword, that kind of thing.
Exactly. All right. So as we get ready to wrap up this segment here, any parting words of wisdom you'd like to share with our audience, especially those younger folks who will be tuning in?
Yeah, take a breath before, those times when I've lost my temper and regretted it. Man, learn to take a breath, before losing a temper. Be kind. Understand that people come at life from different perspectives, different religions, different family backgrounds, all that kind of stuff. But if you can just reach across the distance, it's always rewarding to make those human. So that's it. Words of wisdom, if there are any.
All right. And on that note, I'm going to say thank you so much, Jeb, for sharing your "If I Knew Then What I Know Now" words with us. And my parting words are: continue to stay empowered along whatever journey you are currently on. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Boomer Beat. See ya.
Good news you can use for your life.